For many male survivors of sexual abuse, the road to healing can be long and difficult. The trauma these men have experienced doesn't just fade away, it shapes their lives in ways that often go unseen. To cope, survivors employ a whole range of mechanisms to push their pain into the background. These responses can be protective in the short term, but they tend to come at a cost. And I want to talk about a few of the more common coping mechanisms today. Avoidance is one of the most common coping strategies. Survivors often avoid situations that remind them of the trauma. Of course they would, avoiding certain places, people, or even their own emotions. The idea is simple. If they don't confront the pain, then they won't have to feel it. But in reality, avoidance of this type only pushes the trauma further back into the shadows, which makes it harder to face when it eventually resurfaces. Another very common type of avoidance among survivors is avoidance of social situations. A lot of survivors avoid parties, gatherings, or crowds because they don't feel safe. They fear they won't be able to assess any potential threats when there are so many people around them. Also, lots of men fear that if they engage with other people, those around them might be able to see through their defenses and recognize the trauma and therefore judge them. Of course, none of us are surrounded by people who can read our minds. The threat's not really there, but for the survivor, the fear is all too real. Compartmentalizing is another tool that many survivors use. This basically involves mentally separating the trauma and locking it away in its own box in your mind. Or it can involve extensive efforts to make sure that different parts of the life, work, relationships, and personal emotions are kept separate so the survivor can control the flow of information and doesn't run the risk of having his trauma uncovered. They may seem fine on the surface, but inside a storm is brewing. Compartmentalizing creates a divide in our psyche that can make it difficult to form meaningful connections with others or even understand our own emotional needs. And then there's dissociation, when the mind tries to protect itself from overwhelming emotions by disconnecting from reality. For survivors, dissociation is a way of detaching from the trauma, often through a sense of leaving the body or zoning out in the middle of activities. In this state, the survivor can feel numb, detached, or even like they're watching their life from the outside. While dissociation may offer temporary relief, it also prevents healing by disconnecting the person from their emotions and their body. But avoidance, compartmentalizing, and dissociation are not solutions. They are coping mechanisms. And they do help survivors manage unbearable pain. Over time, though, these strategies can take a toll on mental health, creating barriers to real emotional healing. My work centers around helping survivors confront their trauma, understanding how it continues to impact their lives, and learning how to safely process their pain, how to deal with it, and how to rebuild their sense of self. Healing is possible, but it requires breaking down the walls built by these coping mechanisms, among others. It's a journey of reclaiming one's own story and finding peace one step at a time. You can do this.